wanted to build it on this site. This site floods, so it's in the floodplain, it floods fairly regularly, so they've got to find a way of dealing with that. And the client obviously was aware of that, and he was prepared to put in extra money to allow him to build on that site. So what they did was they made the whole building, it's got sort of double foundations essentially, because you've got this case that's this reinforced concrete hole basically the building sits in, so you've then got a building that sits inside of that, so you're doubling the whole structure below ground. And then when it floods, that underground reservoir then fills up with water and the building floats. And it floats, it rides up almost like a pontoon where you've got a marina, where it rides up the poles. That's what this building does. And that's a really expensive way of doing it. I mean, I can't remember what the figures were now, but he spent so much money in the ground that you could have built the building somewhere else for the money he spent in the ground. But they were absolutely adamant they wanted to build it on that site. So you've got to deal with it. And I mean, there are probably other ways that are cheaper actually than this seems to be overly sophisticated for what it's doing. But I mean, it's quite an ingenious way of doing it, I suppose, but it's very expensive. So you know, there's no good having discussions with a client about things that are this innovative, solving problems, without them really understanding what that means in terms of the cost of the building. So that method we just looked at was price per square metre, really straightforward. This next method is called an elemental cost plan. So this is where you start to look at the elements and work out actually what those elements are going to cost individually. So the external walls, the floors, the structure, the foundations, the mechanical installations and all of that stuff. So there's a spreadsheet on Moodle. I know some of you have downloaded it already. As a basic template that you're going to use to build these costs up. So it's based on the same project, but now some of it will be using that gross internal floor area that you've already worked out. You'll also be looking at then measuring the external walls, which bits are solid, which bits are glazed, what the materials are, putting costs in for those. So you use the gross internal floor area, and it might be helpful to develop that a bit so you've got the different functions within the building, because then you're probably going to have different finishes on the floor, you're probably going to have different finishes on the walls. So at least if you know what those individual areas are, that might speed it up when you come to putting the figures into the spreadsheet. But otherwise, this is what you've got currently, and you've got a number here. So the spreadsheet, when you put these numbers in here, it should automatically put that into, fingers crossed, into the spreadsheet. So you've got more information at this stage. You know exactly what all these materials are. This is that same building again. You know this bit's timber, so you can measure that and you can put that in as a cost against that element. You know that this bit is rendered, so you can put that bit in. The bit below is brick. You can measure that. So you're measuring it now in 3 dimensions, not just on the plan. It's actually the elements that you're looking at. So if you're measuring the windows, the curtain wall in, you're actually measuring the surface of the windows. If you're measuring the cladding on the outside, you're measuring the actual surface of the cladding. You're now measuring the internal walls as well. So now we're actually measuring the whole of the area, the perimeter. This is all brick. So that gives us an area for that wall. So it's the perimeter length times the height, obviously, that gives you the area of that element. Does that make sense? And the same, then you start to, where you've got different specifications, different construction methods, The lift shaft might be reinforced concrete, so the green bits might be one material, the red might be another material, these internal walls might be something else. So you've got 3 different elements, so that those will have different costs against them related to the area of that element. Yeah. So this is what you end up with as a summary. So it just goes through the key elements of structure. Substructure, obviously the stuff below ground, foundations, piling in your case. Superstructure, that's everything above ground, including the frame, the external wall cladding and so on. All the internal walls and doors. Then there's the finishes, which is all the wall finishes, floor finishes, ceiling finishes. Any furniture like reception desks or cafe counters, that kind of thing. And then building services, which a lot of these, when I show you the analysis sheet in a minute, some of these are based on the gross internal floor area rather than elemental, because with things like services, you probably at this stage don't know, it's not been designed, so you don't know, you can't split it up into elements, you can only work on what it would generally cost to heat that space. And then external works. And then these preliminaries, this is a percentage that you add on at the end of the cost build-up that allows for those things that the contractor will have to do to build it. So the fencing and the site cabins and the management and so on, and his profit. And then a contingency, which is basically an allowance of money for things that you don't know about, unforeseen things that might occur, things you find on site that's not immediately obvious. So then using that SPONS book again, when you go further into the document, there's what we call building cost models. So in the same way as the cost per square metre had typologies of building, this is the same. So as a quick way of trying to build up a more analytical method of cost, you can use these cost models because it's got a lot of typical things in that are common to that type of building. So you'll find that there's office buildings, schools, factories, community centres, sports centres, and it's basically a spreadsheet of that's already completed, and you would use that as the basis, and then you just change any elements that aren't what you're doing. So your building won't be exactly the same as this. Things will be different, and the template that I've put on there is basically a HS2 cost model. So it's not your building, but it's something similar to your building. So some of it will be the same, some of it won't be the same. You know, I've put things in there to do with cladding on the outside that is probably not your building, but some of it will be similar to what you've got. So you need to go through it and change the bits that aren't right and put the specification. It's just an outline specification of what you've actually got in your building. So that's what it looks like. That's the top and the bottom of the spreadsheet. So that's where your gross internal floor area will come when you put it into that first little table. It should come onto there, and then everywhere where you've got, this is the unit of measurement for the individual elements. Some of it, as I say, is gross internal floor area based. Some of it is metres cubed, so that's obviously the three-dimensional form. Some of it is metres squared, so that's an area of floor or an area of wall. And some of it is linear metres. So if it's just got, there isn't one on there, but if it's just got metres, it just looking for a length. So if it's handrails, for example, for a staircase, you measure that in linear length. So you've got 10 linear metres of balustrading. And some things are items, so where you've got one of them, like a lift, we don't break that down into all its component parts. We just put it in as a lift, one lift, and that's an item, or one reception desk. and then we might put a lump sum figure in for that. And then you come out with a total at the bottom here, and then these percentages will add in the contingencies and the preliminaries, and that's your total, and this will be, should be, the cost per square metre that you then can compare with what you've already done to see how different that might be. Yeah, it's the same thing. So on this, you're going to be measuring, you know, what is that wall finish on the outside, what's the wall finish on the inside. Those are going to be two different elements, or it might be part of the same build-up. What is your structure? How much of it is glass? What's your lift shaft? Is that concrete? How much of it is, how much foundations have you got? The more foundations you've got, the more expensive it's going to be. So this is how my floor area is built up on that one. So that would go into that spreadsheet and start to calculate those things. So when at the back of the Spons book, I can't find the page, but I'll open it up in a minute. There's a whole load of different elements. So if you're using a cost model, like I say, there are going to be things in there that aren't the same as your building. So you're going to have to find within Spons something that is more like what your design dictates in terms of its finishes. So if you're looking for external cladding that's not what I've got in that cost model, then you need to be finding something that's like that and then putting the rate in. So where you've got wrong way. So where you've got these elements in here, if this is not what you've got and you're putting something else in here, then this rate will change. This rate is the rate. If that's a square metre, that's the rate per square metre for that element. So if you've measured, if it was, so it's the roof. If that's the area of the roof, the area of the roof goes in here, that's the rate, that's how much it costs per square metre to do a plywood roof with a single ply membrane on it. It's £150 per square metre, and that square metre is actually the area of the roof. So these are, where it says metres squared, now you're looking at the actual area of that element. Does that make sense? Yeah? So I think if you can start now just having a look at that spreadsheet and looking at your designs and start to work out some of these areas and start to think about which bits of that cost model aren't like your building and find something that is like your building.
How are we going to be marked? Are we going to be marked on accuracy or how efficient the building is?
No, you're not marked on how much it costs.
No.
It's really about the process.
So to be just as possible.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it doesn't matter if it comes out at, you know, £3 million. It's really, as long as the way you've done the cost so far, sensible. It's about the process, really, not whether it's an efficient building or not.
Costa. Second?
Calculating your cost plan. No fee. That's alright.
Guys, I'm taking video. If you will need it, I will just send you.
So that's the section. That's the section in Spons that's got the different elements in it. And then if you're using something that's really new, you have to do search on Google. Praxis. Yeah, you have to deal with that. So is that your area? Yeah. Yeah, just part of the analysis will be a reflection of the end. As I said, we're not marking it based on whether it's got value for you. Well, I mean, you know, it might be that you say, I've had a cafe.
I'm sure we're not
You know, that's part of why we do this.
That wasn't me.
Still times what you say.
That was me.
Twice the size of that. Well, I mean, that 250 is absolutely
Oh shit, that's my handwriting.
things that aren't for this, it's about the process,
Così questa. Ok.